Hi and welcome to another edition of the Leadership Untitled podcast with me, Rob Moores. This is the show that brings together experts from the fields of leadership, L&D, coaching, HR, you name it, to share hints and tips and just have conversations that will hopefully help you navigate that field of leadership that little bit easier. My guest this week is John Amaechi, ex-NBA star, in fact the first English player inside the NBA, turned psychologist, speaker, best-selling author, leadership expert, you name it. He's just launched his new book, which is called It's Not Magic. And what I love about this book is that he talks about the simple techniques, the simple skills that are required just to be a better leader. In other words, it's not magic. The simple things we need to do, but we need to work at them. Equally, his previous book, The Promises of Giants, gave me one of my key mindshift moments of going, okay, if we actually reframe what we're saying to our people into promises to them, how does that change the gravitas of what we're saying? Something I'd invite you all to take a look at. Anyway, enough from me. Let's listen to John. Please welcome him to the show. John, welcome to the Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm already stuttering. I can't believe it.
Happens to the best of us.
Well, yeah, and a lot more to me than it should. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. At the starting point, what I like to do is just give the audience just a very quick intro as to why I was attracted to you to come along to the podcast. I'm going to make an assumption that quite a few of my listeners will have heard or seen you before, certainly whether that's on the TV or whether that's read your books, hopefully. And if not, we'll soon sort that out by the end of this episode, making Excellent. Them want to. But for me, there's a story in the transition from where you were as an NBA basketball player, your journey through that then suddenly came into leadership, and your message around leadership, because I'm a leadership coach by trade, as my listeners will know, and just your story about leadership, which I'm not going to give the game away before we get flowing, but there is something very values-driven, natural and authentic about it. But at the same time, whilst your message is a very simple one, you don't paint the picture that it's easy at the same time, which I absolutely love. So that was why I was keen to get you on. And obviously, I'd listened to your audiobook version of, as you've got behind you, for those on YouTube, The Promises of Giants. And I just the word, it's just, I hadn't heard of people referring to these commitments as promises before. They're always values or rules or traits or things like that. So that just got me. Yeah. So what brought you into this then, from MBA to leadership? What triggered the interest?
So I always knew I'd want to be a psychologist. For me, it was, I watched my mother, because to me, this leadership piece was simply triggered by watching people operate and behave. To me, leadership always has been a promise. It is a promise of a kind of experience. And that's what I wanted to kind of develop in other people, this sense that the things that they're saying, they land differently when you've got a leadership title. The things that you say, they land differently when you have status or power of some description. And so when I was 7 years old, I was watching my mum, who was a GP in Heel Green in near Stockport.
Yeah.
And I watched how she operated with people. And it was very clear to me that she was having some kind of magical impact on the people that she talked to. And it was nothing to do with their technical skill. And even as I'm saying that now, I don't know why this is not kind of lodged in my head before, but that is something I continue to talk about. Your technical skills are important. They are necessary but insufficient to your success as a leader, right? You need to have some skill, obviously. But it wasn't her medicine knowledge, her diagnostic knowledge. That wasn't the thing that changed the lives for people. It was something else. It was her interpersonal skills. It was the way she attuned her attention to enable people to feel safe, psychologically safe, as we might say nowadays. But what's interesting is that I go back to, I mean, from the very beginning, when I go back to Stockport, and now when I go back to Stockport, invariably people come up to me, and there's still something in me that gets quite excited that they're going to come up and they say, "Oh, I remember you from back in the day," or "I saw you on television," or "I read your book." But invariably, if I go back to Manchester, it is not that. They say, "My mum or my dad or my carer was your mum's patient." And just think about that for a second. How remarkable is that? It's not them.
Mm.
They often would never have met my mum. They simply knew about her through what patients said about her. And I just think that's it right there. If you want to describe what leadership looks like, it's the idea that it's intergenerational, right?
Yeah.
People around you learn about your exploits, your consistency, your keeping of promises through, relatives. That's an amazing testament, I think, to her impact.
Absolutely. You mentioned your mum there, and it's like it's obvious from reading the book, but also just the fact that the new book coming out soon. It's not magic; is actually dedicated to her. Um, Tell me more about that relationship with your mum and why that drives you so much.
I suppose two things drive it. One, that I noticed in the moment things that she did that felt quite deliberate about her
Mm.
leadership, things that felt, whether it was a leadership of me, a leadership of us as children, my two sisters and myself, whether it was about supporting us through difficult engagements, tough conversations with headmasters in my case,
Oh, we should ask her more questions about that.
amongst
That could be
others,
interesting.
right? Right. And so there was that part of it, but there's also the fact that she was around for very little of my life. So I am older now than my mum was when she died.
Hmm.
My sisters and I kind of, we had a family reunion in Morocco last year. So we're all sat around, and here we are around a big fire pit in relatively warm weather in the wintertime. And like it's amazing and kind of reflective in a moment where you think I'm older than my mother was when she died. So not only did she have this massive impact, she was gone, and so that enabled for me, or at least maybe my response to that pain was this constant reflection on our
Mm.
interactions and almost seeing them as lessons, as things that I could take and use. Almost all the wisdom I have is borrowed. If it's not borrowed from my mom, it's borrowed from another researcher. I do try and cite the sources because I think it's important that people know it's not my genius. But I think that's why she's so important. And even my students at the University of Exeter, they notice because one of them, when assigned the book for reading, as they all cruelly are assigned, um, read it and said to me quite boldly, "Say you're not the star of this book." Yeah, and this was The Promises of Giants, my last book. You're not the star of this book. Your mum's the star of this book. And it's exactly right. And what I intended with that book, and to a lesser extent with this one, it's still very much centered around leadership, but also her stories too. This idea that people get to be introduced to her,
Mm.
even though she's gone.
Yeah. Well, relationships, that's what builds it all. And it completely, it resonates with me. I mean, I was 4.5 when my granddad passed away, sadly. Um, but exactly as you've just been talking about there, the moment he left a watch to me that I didn't know about or didn't understand at the time. But I probably talk about him more than anyone in my family. And that watch and that relationship and what it
Yeah.
stands for and all those great things.
It's got a
Um,
gravity to it, doesn't it? It's something it keeps revolving around, and these memories and experiences they keep pulling you back in, which I think
yeah.
is it's quite a warm and lovely thing to happen.
It does, and the more I talk about it, than my mum, she talks about the relationship and the things we did that I can't remember. So it strengthens it even more. I think I read somewhere as well that when you mentioned with your mum, it says at the age of 7 you were convinced your mother was a Jedi.
It's very true. It's very because that was the era of the original Star Wars, right? So,
Yeah,
A New Hope came out. It was December. It came out, I think, in November or October in America, but it was December in the UK. And I went to watch it with her at the theatre in Gatley.
yeah,
And I watched her all the time. I used to go on visits with her because back in the day, I mean, it's so different now. Back in the day, doctors would go out to your house, and so you wouldn't even have to come to the surgery. And I used to go on it with these were fleeting, 5 minutes in and out, right? Because she was visiting so many people.
Yeah.
And I watched how she operated and behaved with people. And it always struck me, again, there's something magic about what she's doing. There's something unique and special and wondrous about what she's doing, and the speed of the interpersonal impact. A room
Yeah.
full of people who are crazy with frustration, with fear, who at
Mm.
the end of it are calm and able to cope, and even though nothing's changed. That was the amazing part, right? The sick person upstairs wasn't better. My mother also worked a lot in palliative care, so
Mhm.
many of the people she worked with, maybe the patients she had, they were never going to get better. So how is it possible that she left this room of frantic relatives in a
Mm.
better position than when she arrived, despite the fact nothing changed? Anyway, she took me to see A New Hope. We watched it, and there's a scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi waves his hand at the stormtroopers and use the Jedi mind trick on them. And I was like, I've seen this before. I've seen this before. And my mum in those, and that's the moment I realized my mum's a Jedi. And that wasn't the most exciting part about it. The most exciting part about it for me was the idea that if she's a Jedi, then I'm probably a Jedi. And so, yeah, it's remained a thing. I mean, I've got a little plaque that one of my clients gave me, which is "You'll always be our Yoda," and so it's become a running theme now. You'll see lots of Star Wars related stuff.
Mm.
We got a chance to work with one of the studios that made one of the later Star Warses, one of their clients, and so I've got props from the studio and stuff. It's
Oh,
it's
I love it.
it's a proper addiction on my part.
And again, though, it just keeps that relationship alive as well. It just keeps it flowing through. I absolutely love that. With my granddad, the watch he was given was an Amiga watch. So that's the thing for me. I wish to this day he'd been given a Casio. It would be a lot cheaper. But no, it wasn't. It was Amiga. So you mentioned the magic piece then. It's like, so you opened the new book, 25th of September. We're coming out, are we not?
That is correct, yes. Though I
Excellent.
have found out there's a bunch of people who got their copy already who pre-ordered. I didn't really, in fact, some people got their pre-order copy before I got my author copies. But anyway,
That's not right.
I'm glad for them. I'm glad they've got it.
Exactly, yeah. So don't wait if you're listening to this. Go and get it anyway. But you open it back and saying, this stuff, it's not magic. So, well, you looked at your mother there. You've talked about your mother, and you've seen this kind of Jedi magic coming from her that's kind of carried on. But at the same time, now you kind of go, it's not magic. So, what is it that made you want to kind of debunk that mystique of leadership?
There's two things. One, I really enjoyed the idea that somehow the skills that I had working with clients was indeed mystical. There is something about that that makes you feel utterly unique, special, and even, although this is ugly, I think it might be true, a little superior.
Yeah.
And because it was so intoxicating, I knew it was wrong. Because I liked it so much, it appealed to me so much, my ego swelled with it so much, I knew it was wrong. And then also, the second part of it is that I started to find that it had this really stultifying effect on people. So, you're a coach, you work with people, and they will sometimes look at a skill that you have, and they'll say, I could never be that good. You're a natural. And there's some part of it that is appealing to say, yeah, well, I am, I popped out of the womb and I was ready and articulate and whatever else. But you've earned those skills through a sequence of mundane and interesting experiences in your life. And you've chosen to use them purposefully. And if we allow people to think that it's somehow innate, then there's an ability to say, well, throw my hands up. I can't lead this team through disruption. I can't manage this difficult person. I can't help this person who needs a little more support because I don't have those skills. I wasn't born with them. And it's so easy to then just fold your hands and say, I'm just going to get on with the mundane day to day of management and ignore my leadership responsibility. And I saw people doing it. I saw coaching clients of mine who were like, well, whether it was you've got the gift of the gab or, you just innately tuned into this psychological stuff, which I still don't understand how they think that works. But it was getting in the way. It was getting in the way with my colleagues. who were saying, well, the reason you can manage all these different clients in these different sectors, I don't know about you, Rob, but I think one of the real challenges for coaches is that you work with people in context, right? And working with somebody who's a leader within or at least a manager within like the construction industry is not the same as working with somebody who's a partner in a accountancy firm is not the
Mm,
same as working with, you know what I mean? And they were
mm,
like, well, you just kind of, and they threw their hands up in that same way. And I was like, I must do something about this. So one of my colleagues, Michelle Madden from University of Exeter, she's remarkable, super smart and sharp. She did a study on me. She followed me around. She watched me when I teached. She watched me when I was coaching. She watched me when I was group coaching, small groups. She watched me while I was doing masterminds, which I really love doing and being
yeah.
a part of actually. And she watched me in all these different contexts. She watched me when I gave speeches and watched me in all these contexts. I have to admit, I think I was hoping she would come back with like 98% of it was just ordinary stuff, but 2% was magic. But she came back with 100% of it is just really ordinary stuff in not even that interesting combination.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people need to know. If you're willing to graft, put in a bit of work, and it isn't overwhelming work, but
Mm,
just consistent work, then the skills that are required to be a leader of real impact to help people through these unbelievably challenging times, they're available to you.
mm. Another little alarm bell's gone off in my mind as you were speaking there as well. This idea that, if people are under this impression and pressure that it is magic and they're not able to do it, how much is that is fueling this increase of imposter syndrome that people talk about?
So I recently read some, so, and I've got to order my thoughts here. I think that imposter phenomena is something that uh, there's a group of people in power who want people who aren't in power yet, but have real potential to have imposter phenomena, right? That I think is a reality. I went to a conference, BPS, British Psychological Society conference, must have been 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Must have been 10 years ago. And I walked into the end of someone's presentation because I was doing that thing where you run around and you try and go to everything. So
Yeah.
you're in 50% of this and 80% of this. And sadly, I only caught the last little 10% of her presentation, but I'll never forget. She stood on the stage. She said, never forget that imposter phenomena isn't an individual pathology. It is how people want you to feel, how some people in authority want you to feel. It keeps you under control.
Mm,
And then more recently, and I don't know if you've read this piece. I can't think of where I found it, but I'll if I find it, I'll send it to you.
please.
It was this piece about how imposter phenomena is actually quite convenient for people. And I think this feels a bit hard, but there's a sense that for some people, giving in to imposter phenomena prevents you from the tension of never quite meeting your ambition
Mm,
because you can decide to curtail your ambition because you've got this imposter phenomenon. So it works from both sides. I think there are people out there who want all of us to feel impotent. And
mm,
my books are all about help, not this ridiculous manifesting anybody can do anything, but the idea that if you're willing to put in the effort, learn some new skills, you can do remarkable things.
mm,
And I think that's what I hope people with imposter phenomena will bear in mind. Effort, consistency, basic skills, you can do remarkable things.
mm. And I guess, piecing those two things together to some, it might be the convenient way of not having to work harder and put that amount of effort in to be these things as well. You're like, well, I've been on a course. I don't need to work hard because I won't ever be as good as that. So I'll just do the basics.
Yeah. And it's such a shame because the world is littered with poor quality. I hesitate to call them leaders, but people with power and authority. It's littered with them.
Mm,
And And then I look around and I meet people, and and you'll have had this experience too, some of the coaches you meet who have no idea how utterly remarkable they are now, never mind how amazing they might be in 2, 5 years, right?
absolutely.
It's like I want them to kind of manifest through effort the potential that they've got, because otherwise we're left under the heel of these leaders who wield
Mm.
authority like a weapon instead of something to empower.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with you. It kind of goes into another part of the book as well, something that really jumped out. There were certain quotes and certain phrases that jumped out to me. And one of them was this idea of library of experiences. Because this, obviously, you've been talking already about reflection and obviously the relationship with your mother, that it's about pure reflection back in there. Tell me more about drawing on and what these library of experiences mean to you.
Yeah, so the library of experiences it's more than just the idea that I've done stuff and therefore it exists, because this is an archive of memories. This is the ability to look at these memories, have them in some way connected and organized so that lessons can be drawn from them.
Yeah.
It's the act of not just having an experience, but then tagging and filing it, and often it's the most mundane experiences too. In the book, I talk about an experience of seeing two, I almost said kids. They were young people. I'm old now, so they look kids, but they were two young people who were baristas. Both of them spoke English as a second language. Neither of them spoke the same first language. And they were talking to each other about how much they wanted to achieve in this world, but how they felt limited because when people looked at them, they just saw them as nothing. And this was right after going to the gym in the morning, so I wasn't at my sharpest. But I remember looking at that experience and just thinking, I don't know what it is yet, but I've used it so many times. I've spoken about it so many times, and not just in the book. And that's what I just tagged it in that moment. I didn't try and give it a category because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to use it, but I knew this experience was something important. And I should hold on to it in a space that could be curated a little bit. And that's what this is about. The library of experiences, all of us have got great experiences, but not all of us really look at that and say, I'm going to tag these things and file them. And then really importantly, enable the recall of them so that when you need them, they can pop in your head. Because most people, and I did have a lot of pushback on calling it this in the book, but most people mentally clench, right? So they've got all that stuff is in your brain. It's cataloged and you've got it. But when the right moment comes, it feels like it's stuck. And it's because most people, when they want to deliver something from their brain, they squeeze it
Mm.
and clench the pathway that would send the right thing to your mouth
Yeah.
instead of just relaxing and breathing into it. So that's what that chapter's about. And that's what the library experience is.
Well, I love the term clench. It certainly made me remember it anyway. And it's
Right.
just like, there you
That
go.
was the point. People were like, well, could we find something a little less kind of colonic? And I was like, yeah, I do understand what you're saying about it. But at the same time, it is the feeling that many people have, this idea
Mm.
that their thoughts are just absolutely being prevented. It's like there's a tube coming to their brain and it's just being prevented from getting to it. They know it's there. That tip of the tongue phenomena. Everybody's had that. So yeah, I hope by reading the chapter, people realize that they have got this immense wealth in their head if they're willing to do this process of revisiting and cataloging and really thinking about the experiences they've had, and then make the effort to do some of the breathing exercise. And I know it makes people roll their eyes, but those things that will allow them to recall the things that they've got, the richness of what they've got in their heads.
What is it you think, in your experience, stops people from doing that? Why aren't they doing that?
I honestly, well, I think a huge number of people are told that their lives are ordinary, uninteresting, and lack any kind of meaning in the greater scheme of things. And if that's what you think of the experiences, if you think you are both utterly forgettable and the interactions you have with most people are utterly unimportant, then there's no reason for you to try and log them. And I've never met anybody. It's one of the few universal things you can say, right? I can say, I've never met anybody who hasn't had a set of experiences that I haven't gone, ooh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Mm.
You know, I had some bloke and he was telling me, was a captain of industry, that type of person, but was telling me about experience in his allotment when he had a conflict with his next door neighbor. And I was like, that's brilliant. Have you ever used that in talking? It's like, there it is. You hadn't thought it was important. And
Mm.
so I think that's what gets in the way. And then the other part is that people are told that they are unimportant to an extent where sharing an experience that they've had can feel like an imposition on other people. Oh, you don't, you know, how many times have we had, oh, you don't need to hear all of the details. I do actually. And not just I need to in order to get the full measure of it, but I want to because what you're saying is valuable. So I
Mhm.
think those are the reasons why we don't use our library of experiences the way we might.
Absolutely. And I guess, that ties into what we were talking about before, the imposter stuff and maybe people wanting you to think in that way. What I also love about that chapter is, and from a previous life in learning and development, you've actually got some guidance in the chapter there, like a learning loop almost to help people do this.
Yeah, I lose track now of which chapter it's in, but I'm amazed by the people who think that learning is exposed to something, remember something, can spit something out.
Yeah.
I'm amazed. Even educators, I think I was guilty of that before I saw this presentation by somebody on it years and years ago. But it's not that. Forgetting is a part of this process, right? You learned something or you're exposed to something, you forget most of it. You do some reflection, whether that's revision exercise or just rethinking about it.
Mm.
And and then you remember a bit more, but you've forgotten some other stuff, and so you do a bit more, and then eventually, and only eventually, it becomes this thing that is suddenly second nature. But you haven't considered there was a whole pathway there where most of it you didn't remember. I'm having this right now. I just did a piece on discursive violence
Mhm.
post the murder of Charlie Kirk and the inevitability in this environment of what I call sonic libertarianism, the pathway that leads from this sonic libertarian idea all the way through to discursive violence and then on to physical violence is inevitable. And yet this thing, and even now I'm saying this, I'm in trouble because I don't remember it yet fully. But there are like three or four elements that sit inside discursive violence. That is the violence that people use with their words, the things that they say that really wound people and damage groups of people through verbal attacks. And I can't remember all of them. I've got a few days before I go on this trip, and I'm going to have to remember them all. But I'm in that cycle of early forgetting because I do
Yeah.
know it. If you showed it me in front of you, I'm like, yeah, of course. But that's what we've got to be kinder to ourselves. Remember that our brains are amazing, amazing. They are not computers. They're amazing, amazing things that we barely understand. But what we do know is remembering is, for the most part, an incredibly slow process, unless it's something traumatic. And recalling what you've remembered is another part of the process that requires you to trust and believe in yourself as much as anything else.
Absolutely. Well, I think the chapter really, for me, one of the key words in there is about this idea of pattern recognition and reframing and synthesis. So as soon as you start to recognize the value in that piece of information or that data or that skill or whatever it might be, that's when I'll start to remember it. You just made me remember. Absolutely, I fell into the same traps. I used to work at Sky many years ago doing inductions, and it would have been like 4 weeks for an induction, something like that. And I can remember someone in the coaching bay afterwards going, "Oh well, the trainer's never told us that." And me and this other trainer in the other room, both at the same time, went back to the room, got the flip chart, we put it on, stormed out, and said, "Look, we did cover that." And then I think years later, I watched a talk by Charles Jennings on 70-20-10 and kind of like the learning model through that way. And I was like, how stupid was I?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not an insult to the educator, right? It's just part of the process. There's some things that people are going to see. And as you pointed out, because they can connect it to something they already know or something they're already interested in, they'll remember that piece. And then there'll be another piece that they won't remember. I know all the dative prepositions in German. I don't know any other German, but I know all the dative prepositions in, auf, an, vor, und, über, hinter, zwischen, neben. I can say them all and only in that order because that's how my German teacher, Frau Musket, taught it to me
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years ago. So there it sits, right, as a piece of information I can actually recall really easily. But the rest of German, occasionally I hear something, I'm like, oh, I remember hearing that. But Frühstück is maybe that's it.
I think the same experience on a daily basis on TikTok when someone posts an advert from the 1980s and I know every word of it.
Yep. Yeah.
I can't even remember my own name most days.
I know it is amazing. It's some of this stuff just sticks, and it's
Yeah.
the connectedness of it with the emotion of the moment, or the product that you loved,
Yeah,
or the memories around it. Right? It's
exactly that. One of the other quotes that really stood out for me, and there's kind of reasons behind the scenes on that which we could come on to for me, but he said that the things they said that made you less might be the most powerful parts of you. I absolutely love that quote. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it alludes to what we were talking about earlier, or what you sparked me to think about earlier. This idea that many people will be told stuff about themselves that they think is automatically is a massive hole in them, something that makes them incapable and unfit to lead. And yet there is a way of framing vulnerability, reflecting on vulnerability, adapting around vulnerability that can make you remarkable. There are so many things I am not good at, and yet reframing them has helped me. I've got a goldfish memory. My team, even around this book, it happens, and I swear to you, I don't do it on purpose, but I sat with one of my teammates the other day, and they were saying this quote to me for use in one of our sessions. And I was like, that's amazing. Who's that? Tell me, can you send that to me so that I can? And they just looked at me like, because it was me. And it was from It's Not Magic. Something I finished writing in March,
Yeah.
and nothing, right? And so, but we've reframed this weakness to help in other to kind of get around it in other ways, to understand that because I know this is the case, my use of pen and paper, my use of my multiple screens when I'm doing virtual stuff allows me to get around that, but also gives me other advantages that helps me be a bit more sharp and retain the stuff that's most important in engagements. But mostly, yes, I just want people to realize that as people try and wound you with information about you that might be true, if not objectively stated, understand that those things don't have to sit there as wounds for you. They don't have to sit there as open gaps in you. They can just be an opportunity for you to understand yourself better and find ways to adapt and grow and be even better.
Mm. It really resonated with me on an idea of kind of true inclusion and strengths. I've in one of my programs, and just throughout my leadership career, I've done a lot of work with strengths, and it's kind of occurred to me through personal experience as well that quite often those strengths are recognized by others and put aside. Yeah, you're good at those sort of things. And then there's this other little bucket of weaknesses that you've got. And I started to see this correlation in so many people, certainly in their top strengths, that these things that they think they're not so good at, and or they're told they're no good at and they need to improve, are actually probably because they're so good at this other thing. So, for example, for me, it would be a case of I can be really good at being very analytical and on feedback and quite deliberative, really a kind of a critical eye that you want me to be sometimes. But because of that, that can come across, if not kind of held in check, that could come across as quite overbearing and quite negative.
Yeah, it's very true that lots of our positives, if demonstrated consistently or overplayed, can take on a negative tinge.
Mm.
But it's also, the interplay between what is positive and negative, what are deemed as positive or negative traits, is contextual, right?
Absolutely.
There was an era where being a man who yelled at everybody, who slapped women on the bottom, and didn't think a thing about dating the women who were in the office was a deep positive trait, right?
Mm. Mm.
And now, well, I was going to say now it isn't, but now at least we know it shouldn't be. Um,
Mm.
and now at least we know some people are being fired for it. For example, the man there was a CEO who's recently just been displaced
Mhm.
from a company, from a FTSE company for the very same thing, right? So it's
Mm.
contextual in time. And as you've pointed out, strengths in one area can manifest weaknesses or challenges in another if we're not really mindful, if we're not reflective, if we're not empathetic and think about our impact on other people. But those are all skills too that leaders
Mm.
should have.
Absolutely. I think, it's this idea of kind of in the book you talk about this as well. It's this idea of, there's retaining a flexibility and an authenticity of yourself and your values, whilst we are all being told what a great leader is and what a manager should be. I kind of talk about it in terms of, let's focus more on how we want people to feel rather than what the words are that we want to train managers in. Because you won't be far off if they start helping people feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, we underplay the impact of people's emotions on how they perform, right?
Yeah.
And yet, there's a lot of these very kind of vociferous men who love sports and make lots of sports analogies around leadership in business.
Mm.
They recognize instantly how calm a penalty kick taker must be in order to achieve that penalty kick. They know what it's like when somebody gets the zips and misses, right? Because
Yeah.
they're too frustrated. They know what it is if you come out of the last game you played that you lost and you're still down about it and how it'll impact your performance the next day. And yet when it comes to their leadership, they think that their approach doesn't need to change depending on people's reception of it and the emotional impact of it. It's remarkable how short-sighted it is. But then there's another example of somebody who just doesn't reflect in their leadership, right?
Yeah.
They don't think about, oh, I had a meeting today where somebody cried in front of me. What
Mm.
part did I play in that? There might be context outside of it, but could I have handled that better? How do I manage that tomorrow? That reflection just is
Love that.
absent from too many people, too many
I
leaders.
absolutely, I absolutely love that. And I think, in every single case, 100% the idea of reflection at the end of a day or the end of a month, whatever it might be, but even just a group reflection at the end of a meeting, have the time put aside just for going, well, how's that gone? And I love that idea of, how have I contributed to that? That is a question that everyone listening to this, I'd really encourage you to think of right now. One situation at work that isn't going how you'd like it to be, or a relationship that isn't quite working in the way that it once was, and kind of ask yourself, what is it that you have potentially done as a leader or not done that may well have contributed to that? And that's not about blaming yourself, but
I
you
was
will
I
have
was just going to
contributed
say the
something.
exact same thing. It's exactly right. It's not that leaders can call themselves blameless if they know that they've been responsible for things, but the initial exploration is a genuine curiosity. How
Mm.
am I contributing to this? And can I change that? Can I do it differently? Sometimes you find out the most banal of things, how you say hello to people. One of the things I've seen is how leaders say hello to people differently. They say, "Oh, mate, how you doing?" And yeah, it's great to see you last night at the pub. To one person, the next person, hello, Rob, how you doing?
Morning.
And even that difference right there between, I've just told you that that person over there is my mate and will have therefore an inherently different experience with me. And you're my coworker, not even colleague, because it didn't sound very collegial the way I said it.
Mm.
And it's like, so if you just learned that that was a problem, you could still say, I don't care.
Mm.
But you could also decide maybe I'll build a better relationship because we know that the better connected you are to your direct reports, the better their performance will be,
Mm.
more authentically. And it's not about friendship per se, but it is about a connection that shows caring and trust and psychological safety and all those other things.
Well, I'm glad you just said it there, actually. The key word, these relationships, trust, and that flows through the book as well. Just how important is trust? And I guess, it's a word that if you ask most managers and go, oh, you trust? Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. But, those little moments, what are they missing?
Uh, Trust is vital. I think, let me see if I can pull it up. No, I can't. We have this thing called the Fab Five. And trust and psychological safety and communication and some other things are in there, right? This idea that there are some things, and it's an overlapping Venn diagram because there's connections and all. But
Mm.
if your people don't trust you, then environments like this, where there's external tribulation, challenge everywhere, right?
Yeah.
From people marching in the streets of London as they were on the weekends, and
Mm.
to wars
Yeah.
in lots of different places that impact us on a quite human level, if not through our relations, right, and through our
Mm.
communities. Never mind the workplace transformations, the downsizing, the offshoring, the education mandate to learn all about technology and whatever else. So if people don't trust you, then the ground underneath their feet is constantly moving. It's like living in an earthquake and expecting people to be doing high order brain stuff, high order cognitive tasks while the earth around them shakes. And what they're doing is grabbing hold of their favorite people and their favorite cup to make sure that neither smash. Right? That's what you're doing with trust. You are settling it down. And even as the world might be vibrating slightly, you know that somebody's got it. And you know that you can focus on your keyboard and on your screen and on your tasks and get that done. And, similarly with psychological safety, similarly with communication, the idea that in a world where the messages bounce around like echo chambers, there's somebody in your life saying, I can't help you in every context, but in the context of this work, that's where we're heading for over there. And if you do this in the next couple of days and weeks, you'll be safe. That's
Yeah.
what it's about. And again, even as I'm saying it, how mundane is this? None of this is like brilliance or magic. This is just ordinary stuff that people receive as kind of extraordinary.
And I think, if you plow into it and if people do what we've just been saying, if they sit and reflect for a moment about relationships that they've got at home or at work that are great, that are filled with trust, they can probably see the things that they're doing to build that. They can probably see how long it's taken sometimes to build that.
Yep. But love that. There again, you're just giving people that same brilliant advice, right? Of just a bit of self-reflection. Yeah. You do have examples of relationships that you intrinsically trust. Have you ever asked why? Have you ever asked, why do I trust this person? When I think, oh, I can't pick up my kids today, maybe my partner can't either, or my friends who I normally rely on can't either, who's the person that pops into your head and why? Why do they pop into your head and not somebody else? People are often remarked about it because they think, if you thought, oh, I need somebody to pick up £100,000 from the bank for me, that would be a nice problem to have, right? The person they might think of to do that could be quite different from the person they'd think of to pick up their kid. And why is that? What makes this person fiscally responsible and trustworthy with that amount of money? And yet this person is the person you trust with your child. I think it's a fascinating exercise and such a simple exercise. There's a similar exercise in the book as well, just because it's so simple, isn't it? It's just, and again, that's why the book is called It's Not Magic, because none of this is earth shattering. It's just these small things done help you to identify your levers for trust, what helps you to trust people in which dimension. But also it might help you to understand what are the things that other people need to do for you to feel trust in them, which a lot of leaders never consider.
Yeah, it's lovely that in my mind, I compounded your question there and went, who would I have if I needed them to pick my child up from the bank and collect £100,000 at the same time?
I have to say, I would have some serious concerns if you're sending your child, I don't know how old they are, but sending your child to the bank to pick up your money. There might be a number I have to call for that, right?
Love it. And I guess the one of my favorite quotes from the book, and it really is all encompassing from what we've been talking about, and very powerful yet very simple again, is that someone is learning to lead by watching you. What are you teaching them?
I do love that. I mean, that's awful. That's terrible. You just said a quote that I said, and now I'm saying I love it. So yeah,
I love it too. That's so cool.
Self-congratulatory mode right now, but because it is simple, right? And do you think about that? So I don't know who it was, but one of my colleagues, told me, but I don't know who the actual author of the quote is. They said that managers should never forget that your direct reports' children and loved ones will know your name. It always feels so big for me when I say it, because I honestly don't know who said that quote, but it wasn't me. And this idea that if you just remembered that the people you lead, they're talking about you to their children and loved ones, and either they're having a conversation with their partner about how you really stretched them today, how you made them really challenge and made you realize that feeling a bit stupid as you tried this new task was all right, or they're coming back and saying across the dinner table with children listening in that you made them feel small and stupid and invisible today. And I think there's something about this where if we just remember that every time we are demonstrating our leadership, forget that. Every time we exist in a context where we have power, people are watching us to see what lessons we're teaching. Is it that being a tyrant is the way? Is it that being inconsiderate's the way? Is it that being entitled and demanding is the way? Whatever it is, you're teaching people.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And again, that word you use there is that people will tend to communicate about you in terms of the way you've made them feel, positively, negatively, whatever it might be.
Always. It's that Maya Angelou quote, I think. That's who said it. I think that people will forget what you told them, but they'll remember the way you made them feel. I think that's it right there. And it is about the way you make them feel. It's about the idea that leadership is a thing that reaches inside other people because it's so intently consequential to other people. I don't think that new managers think about this. You suddenly, those people that you are now managing who you were a peer with last year, those people, you are now determining whether they get married this year or not. You're determining because the number you might give them twice a year could determine if they accelerate up the ladder as they should or not. The tasks that you give them to do and the projects that you assign them to is determining the route of their life. And they might be able to look back in 20 years' time and say, if I hadn't had that person, I wouldn't be here right now. How many times do we hear that in the positive, right? I never would have been here today if it wasn't for Rob back in the day. But we tend to hear less, but people definitely hold in their minds and their hearts is the idea of, I could have been so much more had it not been for that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's a great question again for people listening or watching this episode right now, just to pause and ask themselves that. It's a quote I use quite a lot to say, you're not a great leader unless someone remembers you as well.
It's true because it's an earned title.
Mm.
Leadership is not a bestowed one. I mean, they can call you an area manager or a vice president of such and such, but that is a title about your position in a governance organization of the organization, right? But leadership is, as you said, it is something bestowed. People look at you and they say, I felt well led, I felt empowered, I felt stretched and demanded and put upon, but fundamentally, I felt like I got better under this person. I felt protected and safe when I really needed to be. Yeah.
And kind of going full loop with that, it's sometimes that's when people reflect on that person. It sometimes quite often is not a person who had that title. If you kind of come back, thinking about your mum again, GP made people feel like that. She wasn't their leader, but it felt like great leadership.
Yeah.
To you and them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely right. It's often not that. It's often not the title person. It's the person who decides to take it on themselves. The new person who shows up in the office and just doesn't know where stuff is, because we all know that induction is not what it should be in most organizations. And they're the ones who they look at you over a cubicle. They give you send you a DM, a private message during a chat, during a video call meeting, that just sends you the link that you need, or points out where you're supposed to be in the document, or tells you where the loo is, or tells you where the nearest place for lunch is. That's the person that often is that impact. That's leadership, though. Those simple things.
Understanding what the person in front of you needs from you in that moment. And ordinarily, the easiest way to try and find that out is to ask, don't guess. And then there's the trust again. If you get the trust and the relationship, they're going to tell you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I'd love to kind of ask you, as we approach the end of the episode, just thinking about those kind of multiple lives you've now led, as it were. You got athlete, academic, consultant, author, all those things. What, from a leadership point of view, what do you think connects them all that's brought you to where you are?
What connects them all? I suppose, and maybe this alludes to the comment you made earlier, it is the way that I have connected them that is important, as opposed to them necessarily leading one to the other. Because I don't know if people would ask me what connects my sport if I'd have become, as some athletes do, a real estate person or a Wall Street banker. Many athletes, they go from that into Wall Street banking. I'm not sure that people would say, "Oh, yeah, what's the?" But because it's psychology, it feels like there's a connection, but I think the connection is actually the idea that I've put so many things, these diverse and interesting experiences that perhaps I wouldn't had I gone to university and done something different other than play basketball and hadn't gone to the MBA. And
Mm.
I've connected those experiences with pieces of literature and the research that I've got to illustrate them in ways that people find intriguing. It's definitely
Mm.
informed the way that I tell stories and how I try to help people to realize that whilst people look at some of the things that I've done as extraordinary, they are accessible if you're willing to put in a plan, make the effort, and what we call pay the fee, focus, effort,
Yeah.
execution. And so I suppose that's what's special about it. Because even now, if it helps anybody who thinks that playing professional sports is special, I always think it's good to reduce what you do for a living to its core component sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you do that as a basketball player, you realize that you put a ball in a hole for a living. And for
Yeah.
me, was successful less than 50% of the time.
Yeah.
It puts it into stark relief, right? This fabulous career of playing professional sport. I put a ball in a hole for a living. You know, there are footballers out there whose entire job is they make good kicks. They don't even score goals. They
Yeah.
make good passes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm not diminishing the skill of that. I've seen it. I know it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it puts it in perspective when there are people out there who care for other people's children all day and
Mm.
ensure they're fed and cared for, that there are people out there who clean operating theatres to make
Mm.
sure that they're sterile and that no infection will happen for the next person. There are people there who make sure that the vital people show up on time
Yeah.
to deliver their skill, right? So all of a sudden, putting a ball in a hole,
Mm.
I've got some making up to do for Mike. I've got some making up to do.
You're making it up in the books. Don't worry. It's really helping guide people. I think you just maybe remember as well that earlier this year when in golf, Rory McIlroy won the Masters. He I don't know if everyone will know this, but he actually brought in a sports psychologist to help him ahead of it because he'd spent a decade struggling to win the Masters and making mistakes, and then his head would go and all that sort of stuff. And the first thing the new psychologist, whose name I forget, but I'll find it and put it in the notes, just said, first things first, we've got to reframe. So there's what you're talking about again, John, to go reframe that the game of golf isn't about perfection. It's actually a game of mistakes. And every single person on that course today will make mistakes. And once you come at ease with that, then you can move on. And actually, the article I read that in was kind of going, and now just move the word golf, put leadership, put life, put parenting, put anything you want in there. Just go, it's all a game of mistakes.
Yeah, and the thing is, anything that you want to do that's really consequential and challenging and interesting is going to be far too difficult for you to be perfect at it.
Mm.
And I know people now think of instantly the like Tiger Woods or I don't know sports, but they'll see these figures, right? And all I would say to you is if you really examine them,
Mm.
they made a huge number of mistakes, but they were consistent and they reflected on those mistakes and then tried to make different mistakes in the future, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think what a punishment it is for so many people, and not just in sports, but in work, to
Mm.
think that their job is to be perfect. It is to be thoughtful and dedicated and robustly keen on committing as few mistakes as possible, but not perfection.
Yeah. And knowing that we learn most through those mistakes anyway.
Yeah,
So
learning from
how
them.
much
Yeah.
aren't we learning if we don't make those mistakes? If there's one thing you would like leaders to remember or take from the new book, It's Not Magic, as they read it, if there's one key thought as they're reading it that you really want them to drive home, what would it be?
There's no one else. There's no one else, is what I'd say to them. There's no one else. If you're looking around and waiting for some young leader to emerge or politician to emerge or business leader to emerge in your business, there's no one else. There's you. You might be managing one person, you might be managing 10 people, you might be managing, if it's a really irresponsible business, 100 people. There's only you. You've got to decide, is it worth it for you to be the kind of consistent, dedicated, robust, challenging, supportive, and skilled leader that will drive performance in other people, will enable growth in other people, will reduce mistakes in other people, and make a sustainably high performing team. But don't look around and think it's someone else. It's you.
What I love about that, and the kind of message in the books, is that it treats performance and results as the output of all this great stuff. It's not the input. It's not the right, let's do a performance matrix and everything will come from that. It's about people. It's about humans. It's about relationships, conversations. So I'm in. I'm absolutely in. I cannot thank you enough for coming along today to speak about, well, just everything leadership, but also, of course, the new book, which we remind people is coming out on the 25th of September. So please, it's not magic. Please go and look at that. I will put the links, all the relevant links in the show notes so people can get straight to it as well. And while you're there, obviously, take a look at The Promises of Giants, which is the book that really got me into John's writing in the first place. It is a great mindset reset, as I would call it, to think about these things as promises rather than anything else. And then, of course, your first one as well, Man in the Middle. Please take a look at that, because that's got its own journey, which is a fantastic read and very thought-provoking as well.
Thank you so much, Rob. Really appreciate it.
So what we just need to do as our last task ahead of that is to decide, based on what we've talked about, what would be a great title for this episode. Where's your head going with that?
Ooh, well, it is going to, probably because of that kind of, primacy, recency thing. But it's gone to the last thing I've said, because that is the encapsulation of it all. There's no one else. It's you. Where leadership is concerned, there's no one else. It's you.
I absolutely love that. At one point, I was thinking of naming it after your mum. Was Wendy? I think I read. Yeah,
I would love that. That's also, listen, if it's named after my mum, just, what would Wendy do? Just be like Wendy. Be like Wendy.
I'm putting, and maybe this one deserves a subtitle.
There we go.
There's no one else. It's you. Brackets. What would Wendy do?
Yeah. Love it. That would be perfect.
I'm doing that. Thank you so much today. And if people would like to follow you and keep abreast of your messaging, where's best to follow you?
So I am prolific on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just put in my last name, Amaechi, and you'll find me. I'm on TikTok for the young folk. I actually talk about TikTok in the book as a really interesting resource for learning. I'm on Blue Sky, less prolifically, and Instagram, if you're interested in the more casual side of me.
which is where I first saw you and messaged you on all those years ago now. I will put links to all of those social handles in there as well, so please follow John. You will not regret it. And get those books. And audio version is available of Promises of Giants with John reading it himself, which is fantastic if you're as addicted to John's voice as I am. I think it's so calming and melodic, which is fantastic. And the audio version of It's Not Magic, it will be out soon as well. I think
it will. November the 11th. I am told, by the way, I've been told by a number of people who bought the book and bought the audiobook that they buy the book to read and they buy the audiobook to put on before they go to bed, and they're out by the end of the introduction.
I take that as a compliment.
I'm trying to take it as a compliment.
Compliment to the voice and not degrading the message. I like that. Love that. Brilliant. Thank you so much for today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All the best with the book launch. I'm sure it'll go amazing because from what I've seen, the message is superb.
So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Bye-bye now.
Bye now.
Thank you very much for that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I hope you got what you needed.
I have indeed. I've absolutely loved and really valued that conversation. I will get the copies of everything sent over to your team, so they've got it to hand as well.
That'd be amazing. If you can tag us in it if you want to on socials, and we'll make sure that we spread the message.
I'll make sure I do that. Thank you so much. Pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, that's it for another episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast with me, Rob Moores, and my special guest, John Amaechi. The title for this episode is going to be There's No One Else, It's You, with a subtitle of What would Wendy do in honour of John's mum, who is the architect of most of John's leadership thinking, and by the sounds of it, many of the people who surrounded their network also. My thanks again go out to John for joining me today, and to everyone there listening and watching on YouTube. Have a great day, reach out if we can support you at all, and stay tuned for the next episode.